At Sundays?
Yes.
Okay. During Game of Thrones?
No, it's going to be earlier.
Okay.
Just this week because Linda had a death in the family. The only time she could do it would have conflicted with Game of Thrones.
Right.
So Jen was going to do like a Vegas update with Curly as our show, but then they both got sick and they got con crud. So that didn't happen.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
I mean,
And I would
this,
have waited till the next day to watch Game of
right?
Thrones if I'd known ahead of time, but I didn't. I was just like, after the show, I'm like, so nothing happened? No.
Uh, well, at this point, the last two episodes are basically going to be a dumpster fire, so whatever.
Okay, I have Sherd.
Okay. All right. Let me. Where does that keep not showing up there? Okay, it's shared there. All right. See if I can. Nope. Why is it not showing up on Twitter?
I don't know. I just put it on Facebook. But you said it automatically goes to Twitter?
It has in the past.
It's probably just taking a minute.
Okay. All right. Let's well, if it's been shared on Twitter, that's fine. Whatever. Well, I'll just trust it. I'm like I'm not. My head hurts too much to care right now.
Okay.
Ready whenever you are.
I mean, I can do it manually, but I have to change. I'm logged in as Grills and stuff. So.
No, that's okay. Don't worry about it.
Why does this light look so harsh? Damn. All right. I should put lipstick on.
Well, go ahead and do that if you want. We got time. I told everybody on our Facebook page it would be 12, so. That takes effort, is what you're saying?
Yes.
All right, ready whenever you are.
Okay. The first. Nope. I'll start again. The first Earth Day celebrations took place in 2,000 colleges and universities, roughly 10,000 primary and secondary schools, and hundreds of communities across the United States. More importantly, it brought 20 million Americans out into the spring sunshine for peaceful demonstrations in favor of environmental reform. It is now observed in 192 countries and coordinated by the nonprofit Earth Day Network, chaired by the first Earth Day 1970 organizer, Dennis Hayes, according to whom Earth Day is now the largest secular holiday in the world, celebrated by more than 1 billion people every year.
When I say I believe in science, it is shorthand for I know and understand that science is based in fact. I know of and understand to the best of my abilities the scientific method and how it forms facts and theories that have advances in our world. I know for a fact that humans are involved in climate change is real. I know that evolution is a fact, that the Big Bang is a fact, that the Earth is 1 million years old is a fact. So when you hear myself or others of faith say, I believe in science, no, we aren't talking about things of faith, but of fact. Let's talk about science, faith, and politics.
Welcome to Heresy and Hearsay, a podcast to reclaim faith in the context of political discussion. I'm September, also known as 9 of 12, and you can follow me on Twitch and Twitter, and hear me on the Geek Grills and Trust Your Cape podcasts. You can follow Heresy and Hearsay on our website, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and whatever podcast catcher you prefer. Please like, share, and subscribe to us. Also, leave us a review if you have a minute, especially on iTunes. It helps other people find us.
And I'm Reverend Barney, and you can also follow me at Seth Roth II. Heresy and Hearsay has a Patreon site. that you can find at patreon.com/heresy and hearsay, where you can visit and help support us. Just $2 a month goes a long way to help us make this humble podcast. So when we were starting this a couple of weeks ago and we were really trying to work this, Google did a Google Doodle about Earth Day and stuff like that. And I think they do that mostly every year as far as Earth Day is concerned. It's one of the ones that is a consistent Google Doodle for them, if I'm not mistaken. It's not something that I don't not remember them doing. And I know that when I was a kid growing up, Earth Day was actually talked about a bit more, at least in school and stuff. I don't know if it's still something that's talked about much in schools because, well, they it would look really weird for a 44-year-old man to show up in a primary school. I'm just saying, especially as a white guy, overweight white guy in the South, that shows up at primary school. That sets off a lot of red alarms, and they go and ask a lot of questions. But I know that they talked about it and everything, but even again, being in the South, there was always this predication of a religious overtone. And I remember my favorite reverend was for years worked in Africa as a missionary. And there's two kinds of missionaries that I have discovered. There's the hellfire and brimstone kind, and those are not preachers I like anyways. And then there's the ones that talk about the love of Christ and how God accepts everybody. And that was my pastor that I loved dearly. But when he talked about Earth Day, um, when it happened one Sunday, that it was an Earth Day thing, he talked about how we are stewards of this world. And typically when Christians talk about stewards, it's like taking dominion and control of it. But he talked about how God created this beautiful garden and we need to take care of it. It wasn't the most popular one of his sermons because a lot of people are of the old school, of the old Christian belief is like, take whatever, control it however. But I am of that belief that, we are, as part of Christianity, part of our thing is not just to take care of each other, but also to take care of the planet, because God created it for us as a gift and we should, be nice to it.
That makes sense. With all the argument about the, creation myth and Christians insisting, it was exactly 7 days or all that oddness. Um, the least you could do is mind your stewardship if you're going
Yeah.
to believe it was created by God.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one of the things I wanted to touch on is my personal belief in the world and its creation. I believe that God created the rules of how the universe would work, and then He just let it happen. That's not intelligent design, because intelligent design says that He poked a little something here or poked some. No, He set up there are rules to the world or rules to our universe. He created those rules, and therefore, that because of those rules, that's where we are today. That's why evolution happened. That's why the Big Bang happened. All of that stuff, because the rules of science exists. He created that, but then he stepped away and let the mech. It's kind of like a watchmaker. Watchmaker creates the watch, but it's the mechanisms that make the watch run. That's how I kind of see how God did it.
Interesting. I don't know how much sentience I give credence for creation itself.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, it's more spiritually relevant to talk about the soul and any belief in that or collective unconsciousness and how that exists as, God. I have a very microcosm, macrocosm view spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
And in religions, it's often simply this "we were made in His image" thing. For me, I think there's an awful lot of really interesting stories and evidence about collective unconscious where people from different cultures, different parts of the world keep coming up with the same ideas. Beliefs in reincarnation in several religions I find very interesting, and things like genetic memory are incredibly quirky, and they seem to back up that sort of some things are carried from one
Mm-hmm.
person to another, whether it's genetically or it's a returning to the source when you die and then coming back here to live another life, as human or not. So that's all a little more complicated
No,
for me,
and
but I don't see it as like having to be related to making the physical creation of the world something that was enacted by an
mm.
entity.
Well, and here's and this is one of those things that it's like if you look at the pyramids, the both in the Central America and in Egypt, and how they really didn't have any communications yet. Here you go with these things, and no, it wasn't aliens. And I hate. And here's the thing: I hate those alien, stories about how aliens help create the world and all that kind of stuff, because there is an underlying current in at least how I've read it and understand it, an underlying current that these brown people aren't smart enough to do this on their own, that they had to have some outside source do it, and seeing white people weren't smart enough to do it either, it must be aliens.
I don't. Wow. Okay. I've never seen that as racial. This is another like I think you're trying too hard to be outraged. I've heard that a lot, and I've never seen it as racial. I've seen it more as in the timeline of human development and technology that we could not figure out how in the hell they managed this, and we didn't have good records because the language difference between like hieroglyphics and the languages that developed from the ones we use now, trying to figure out how in the world they had that level of math, let alone the physical, overcoming the physical obstacles of building structures of that ilk, how they lined up with stars, even though, because our mythology in the stars is different now. I've never seen it that way, but I've seen it as just like humans in general trying to figure out a way to do that. And here's a crazy story. When my eldest was like 4, he came to us with this story, and I still have this little notebook somewhere where I started scribbling down what he was telling us. But he was trying to tell me and Rob, my husband, about these aliens that had been here. And they came and they were fighting outside of our atmosphere, and they were fighting with each other because one group of them had put us here and we were doing okay, and the other group believed that they should just never have put us here and that was wrong, and so they were trying to destroy us, and the ones that put us here came back and were defending, and there was this big fight going on. He was upset, he was adamant, and he was telling us that. It was mind-blowing. It's like, whew, okay, so we were seated, and now there's an alien war to protect us because people didn't believe we should have been seated, right? It came down to that, out of the
And that's
brain of like a toddler.
and that's why Captain Marvel is now in our universe.
I mean, whew. I mean, how do you explain him coming up with that? I mean, no, it was really weird and complicated. Oh, and he explained it. There's somewhere in there. Oh, I gotta find that piece of paper. There was something about how the dinosaurs. It was that fight where the asteroid got thrown at our planet, and or there was a different fight. The first fight was when the dinosaurs got extinct because they hit our planet, and then we were seated here or something. I got it all written down somewhere. It was wild. He's like, this is why the dinosaurs are dead, is his, like, where he started.
A nice segue into dinosaurs. Let's. No, I don't have any. That's an interesting thing because I remember writing some really weird stuff when I was a small child too. So, but on the same thing, that seems a lot more maybe. But
But I'm not really against the idea that we were seated here. It
I,
can make more sense than we evolved from goo. I mean, more or less the same difference, but discounting rather than the xenophobia involved with believe, like if we do run into alien races, because odds are, and scientists will back that up, odds are we are not the only sentient life or the only life in the universe. That's statistically ridiculous and egotistical to believe. So eventually we're going to run into other races, provided our planet lasts long enough to develop the technology to reach out, or some other race to reach us. And rather than the xenophobic, racist, other belief, to have it in your mind that, like, you know what, they might have known we were here all along and are just waiting, like in some ideal universe in Star Trek where, like, they can't contact us until we reach a certain level of technology to not interfere with our development, the same way that you think God isn't poking around in our business so that we can reach our potential on our own.
I can see that to some degree. I'm just like I'm and don't get me wrong, even in the Bible there is a mention of a UFO, or some theorize that there's a mention of the UFO. Was it
Oh, is it Jacob's
Elijah?
Ladder? Is that what they?
No, it's Elijah. I think it was about the burning wheel in the sky, the fiery wheel in the sky.
Right, yeah.
That there, and it's, don't get me wrong, it's not possible. I don't believe it's not probable that we've been visited. Boy, this has gone off. This has gone off the rails of science. Oops, me and my big mouth talking about aliens. But but it's not out of the way for us to believe that we've been visited, that their technology is so much greater that our conventional ways of finding things or tracking things, or even if we do track it, we can't understand it. But on the same thing, I'm kind of like Carl Sagan at this point when it comes to that. I need proof. I need solid proof. I know if Carl Sagan, one of Carl Sagan's probably biggest desires as he was suffering from his illness is that there was some kind of, because he wanted to believe in aliens. He wanted to believe that we were visited, and he wanted to proof of life outside this planet, sentient life outside this planet, and he never got that, and I think that is a big regret of his. But but talking about dinosaurs, I did, and we'll be posting some videos from other channels. But one of the things and I watched this when it was live because I had to see this, was Bill Nye and what is his name? Kim Ham, who is the founder of the Creationist Museum. And there's a book I've read a couple of times called Idiot America by Charlie Pierce, where he visited it. And it's hilarious that you see dinosaurs hanging out in the Garden of Eden with a neutered, with a Ken doll version of Adam wandering around. We can have dinosaurs, but we can't have genitalia. That's just a bit far, and that's a bit much. But and I think there was like one picture of like a smaller dinosaur with like a saddle on it, if I remember correctly, where Adam was riding a dinosaur. And so there was a debate between Bill Nye, who is an engineer. He he is in the scientific community, and he's an engineer, but he's also now the head of the inner space, or he's basically coming up with the way that we can go to different parts of our solar system using solar energy or solar heat. It's a big, basically it looks like a big, um, what do you call, parachute, but because of the solar wind energy.
Right.
Right. So he's part of that. He's the president of that group, and they actually did a launch about 3 years ago, and they're working on a second one to just see if this works. But there was a debate about creationism at the Creationist Museum, and Bill Nye just mopped the floor with him because no, because first off, Ken is not a scientist, nor is he a theologian. He's a huckster. Yeah, it's what
Yeah.
he is. And so, but even with that, um, he has this like small group of pseudoscientists who probably also believe that skull structure shows the intelligence, which has been debunked for years, but is making a comeback as far as a quote unquote science is concerned. And we'll be getting into secular idiocies in a few minutes, but um yeah, so the pseudoscientists are like, they basically poo poo, for lack of a better term, they basically say that carbon dating is faulty and flawed and all this stuff.
Oh, they go
And,
further than that. They go right in like, it's God testing you. He planted those things there just to test your faith.
and it's like Bill Hicks. Yeah, Bill Hicks was a comedian back in the late '80s, early '90s, who was kind of a predecessor to our Lewis Black. Only he believed this stuff. And one of the things he talked about is like, he talked about that. It's like, God is putting these fossils in the ground to test Christians and stuff like that. And it's like, first off, as if you're a Christian, why are you wearing a cross? I'm sure Jesus looks at that and goes, "Hey, Dad." It's like, if Jesus looks at someone wearing a cross, it'd be like, someone going up to Jackie O with a rifle, with a sniper rifle pin, and it's like, "We're thinking about you." Yeah, it's like, Jesus looking at the crosses, going, "Hey, Dad, let me help you bury those fossils with you." I mean, so
That's
yeah.
I okay. Considering you carry on rosaries with which almost invariably have crucifix on them, in particular, I'll just.
It's a joke. It's a joke. I also carry pin. I also carry. I don't believe in praying to the saints, but I have three blessed saint medals on me most of the time when I leave my house. So yeah, like I'll take anything I can get it. It's kind of like the Snickers commercial back in the day where they're like, "Are you going to be here a while?" Because the coach is like, because of diversity and everything, we're going we're going to have the team prayer is going to be a little different. So they start with a reverend, and then a rabbi comes up, and then you got a shaman waiting in the background, and all this kind of stuff. It's like, move along, Padre, we got a lot of people to go through. Sometimes I just make sure I have all my lucky charms in my hands just to play it safe. I know they say, well, Christians are just superstitious. It's like, I'm a Christian because I'm a Christian, and it's not because I'm superstitious. I'm superstitious because I'm superstitious. So
Yeah. So you're
but
just covering all your bases in case someone else is right about the dogma. Sure.
yeah. Oh, I really should have prayed to Saint Aquinas. Oops. I, we would do the Saint in one of my professors' classes every day. For this particular professor, we would pray the Saint Aquinas prayer before class starts, which is about learning and about enlightening ourselves as human beings. Because Saint Aquinas is the patron saint of theologians and scientists, I think. I'd have to look that back up. But Ken Ham basically got, we'll be posting that video. There's a video that you must have posted later because I didn't see it, about the Neil Gaiman
Oh,
video and
this
Gaps
is
of the God.
yeah, it's really great. It's Neil deGrasse Tyson and Neil Gaiman
Mm-hmm.
talking about like religion and science and the intersection. And I mean, they're both so clever and so intelligent and of good humor that I will post this video. If you're live in our chat, you would get it now, but I'll put it in the notes for our show. And they go through all kinds of great stuff. Neil brings up God of the Gaps, which is an interesting concept that I love a lot. And when you're arguing religion versus science, this is how this happens. Like anything we can't explain throughout history has become, oh, it was God, right? Like whatever natural phenomenon we did not understand was God. And then people who are super sciencey and they're atheists about it feel like, but see, we know this wasn't God. We know aren't just sent by God because something happened. Now we know about prisms and light and this and that. So therefore that proves God doesn't exist. And it doesn't necessarily. So, but it's just an argument that you have that you don't need to have. It's okay to have your faith. It's like magic doesn't not exist because now we understand this was science making it happen, right? Maybe, and if you believe God is part of science and part of the microcosm and the macrocosm, you can incorporate those beliefs. It doesn't have to be a religion versus science all the time. So Neil brings up this God of the gaps, where everybody uses God to explain these gaps in our knowledge. And then Neil jumps in and gives this fantastic, he uses a rainbow in it, explanation of, okay, so a rainbow, we now know, how prisms work and how light works and what that is. But there's this reason that you can't, it's a great place to hide the pot of gold. Excuse me. You can never find the end of a rainbow because of the way we perceive light. Rainbows are seen differently by each person that sees them. And you never see a rainbow that's going like away from you or toward you. You only see them in an arc. And that's because it is based on the perspective that you are seeing it from. It's the observer perceiving it. So you can never get to the end of it because where the end of it is from where you saw it, when you get there, the rainbow would be invisible to you because you're not at the right angle to observe it. And that's why it's a great place to hide the pot of gold. And so, and Neil jumps in, he's like, so you're outing yourself as you don't believe in leprechauns? But really, really great discussion. Neil deGrasse Tyson also brings up the Jeffersonian Bible. Is this something you knew about?
I know of it. I haven't had a chance, and you can buy a copy. They've made copies of it, and I haven't bought it. I've been wanting to buy a copy of it and kind of look over it, but I don't know enough of it to really be intelligent about it.
I had heard of it before, but the description here is really interesting, and I'd be really interested to read. If I'm going to read the Bible again, to read this version. Thomas Jefferson, and I thought it was really relevant to our discussion being political, went through the Bible and pulled out anything referring directly to supernatural events.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, like, yanking out all the magic and the superstition, and then, like, this is the Bible we should be using because this is a moral code.
Right.
And that is a better spiritual path than believing all kinds of nonsense and superstition.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that very curious, and I think I would like to read the Bible again with that point of view. Like, I guess removed, not inserted.
Right. No, and there has been a debate, especially with scholars, about you don't have to believe that Jesus was the Son of God, but that he was a moral teacher. who basically, or that his teachings were, hey, you know, we should take care of each other, basically, and that we should be, we should especially be looking after the poor. And to be fair, the Torah and the Jewish law is very strict about how they deal with the poor. So yeah, I could definitely see that. Um, and as far as someone who is struggling with faith, if they're needing to see step back and because that kind of stuff is overwhelming to them or confusing to them, I could see where this would be a useful compendium to the actual Bible, and say, okay, let's start here, and then we can put in the miracles and stuff like that, so you can get kind of a ground base understanding as a human first.
I think it's a good bridge between religion and science
Yeah,
to be able to do something like that
I agree.
and read
uh
it like that. And then it would be interesting if somebody compiled all the stuff he put out and put that somewhere separate. It's like, okay, this is where the God of the Gaps lives.
yeah.
And then, like, footnote it with, okay, well, science explains, like, this might have been this phenomenon. Wow, that would be a really cool project.
Uh-oh. September suddenly has a new project on her plate.
Oh, no. I promise I won't just determine that anything seen in the sky was aliens seeding us. So.
But my about the rainbow and stuff like that. Here's my thing. Okay, I know that rainbows come from when this, for me, it's more simplistic because I'm not that smart with science. That's why I went with being a theologian. We don't have to know math. There's not uh, algebra chapter 1 verse 2 trigonometry, talking about the saint trigonometry. So I'm grateful for that. But I understand it in this way: when it's raining and the sun is also shining, there's a good chance, if I look from the if the sun is at my back, I should be able, in theory, 9 times, and this happens about 9 times out of 10, to be able to see a rainbow.
Well, yeah, and like, so of course there was a huge flood. It rained for a long time, and then when the sun came out, there was a rainbow.
Right. Here's my
Was it
part of,
God?
maybe. Here's the thing about, see, that's the Noah story. And the Noah story, as far as most modern theologians are concerned, much like Garden of Eden, it is not so much fact as it's depicting, as it's discussing morals and things like that. It's a moral story. Like, Catholic theologians especially don't believe that Jonah spent 3 days in a fish. It is a moral story to tell us about things, and about not doing what God wants you to do. There is punishment for that, but if you come to a revelation that you should do that you should be doing what God says, then your punishment will end. That is the crux of the Jonah story, for example. So the Noah story, though, to be fair, the Noah story is just sort of a retelling in a Jewish and then later Christian sense of the Imam Alish about Gilgamesh. Is that right? Yeah, Gilgamesh. Because and there is actual scientific fact saying that that particular area of the Middle East actually did flood, and therefore that's where, because flood stories are very prevalent in several of the Middle Eastern or that area's storytelling, because of this event that did happen. And go ahead, sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, and I've seen shows and stuff where scientists are in archaeological digs finding different evidence of floodplains and trying to match the times with the Great Flood for the Noah story, and that's interesting to watch. the other thing is it rainbows are beautiful and
Hmm.
inspiring, and if you're going to be spiritual and relate the world around you to your spirituality, it can make sense to try and get hope out of something like that after a disaster. And I actually got a crazy story about that. It wasn't even about, like, we weren't being flooded or anything, but a friend of mine was shot to death. Um,
Hmm.
he laid in the street for 4 hours before he was picked up. And in the neighborhood on that street, like viewing it from my neighborhood over there and knowing where he was, there were two rainbows. Like, not a double rainbow, but two separate ones to either side of where I knew his body lay. That was kind of mind blowing. That was
Yeah.
kind of like, ooh, all right, it's, I know it's science, but it's doing something really, really crazy in a moment.
Hmm.
And so it makes sense for us to attribute to something spiritual when a phenomenon coincides. But causation and coincidence, they're not the same
Right.
thing.
Right. Correct. And here's the thing. There are scientists who are also Christians or of other faiths that say science strengthens their beliefs because of the fact that they see these wonderful creations, or these wonderful advances in science, and it brings them hope as far as that there is something that, not so much driving it, but that there's something out there that is that makes these wonderful things, and makes these. I mean, I have seen pictures of other galaxies and star systems and all of this. The Hubble telescope was one of the greatest things ever once it got its glasses on, and it was amazing some of the pictures we would get from the Hubble telescope, of these beautiful celestial bodies out there and all of these bright, beautiful colors.
Mm-hmm.
And that and that inspires me, and that is awe inspiring. A rain They say some of the prettiest rainbows are after a tornado has come through an area. Tornadoes are disastrous and horrible, but the rainbow is like the sun is going to come out another day and you're alive to see it.
Again, it's all about our perception.
Right.
So I wanted to bring this up. I had found this, or you found the article, right? Adam and Eve
Right.
and Evolution.
Hmm.
And I pulled out some quotes from it because this was a really good article. Um, Though faith is above reason, there can never be any real discrepancy between faith and reason. Since the same God who reveals mysteries and infuses faith has bestowed the light of reason on the human mind, God cannot deny himself, nor can truth ever contradict truth. This is from the Catechism of the Catholic Church.
Hmm.
They also say the question about the origins of the world, if any, and of man, has been the object of many scientific studies which have splendidly enriched our knowledge of the age and dimensions of the cosmos, the development of life forms, and the appearance of man. These discoveries invite us to even greater admiration for the greatness of the Creator, prompting us to give him thanks for all his works and for the understanding and wisdom he gives us as scholars and researchers. That was surprising to me to see in the Catechism, given the way people see Catholics in particular as an extreme wing of Christianity. I mean, at least in certain things. Obviously Baptists are more extreme in some things, but
Hmm.
whatever. But their conclusion reminded me so much of when I was in high school. I was in a public speaking class. And one of the things we were to do was to give a presentation with another person in front of the class. Well, I was in chorus and drama, and I was that kind of nerd. So I had risers brought in to the front of the class. Um, I wore all black. I had a friend of mine, this African American girl. She wore all white. And it was a scene from a play we enacted. And I cannot for the life of me ever track down the name of this play. But it was basically God and the devil discussing Adam and Eve and the tree of knowledge, and I was playing the devil and I had my friend playing God. And the devil's case was, but but if look how much they're praising that beautiful flower, and if they understand the stamen and the chlorophyll, they just have more to praise you for. And that was all of the adversary's arguments, where just let them share more knowledge and have more knowledge, and they will have more to praise you for. And reading that the church has ended up with, that's their view of, instead of fighting against the things we learn and insisting on having the God of the gaps, just praise God more in giving us, although that's a little ironic, the ability to gain more knowledge about creation. Considering, the story just casts Adam and Eve out for eating the fruit, but
Right. And well, and here's the thing. I think part of it is the fact of the crimes that the Catholic Church went against science for so long that they basically had to do a near 180 to rectify it. I mean, the trial of Galileo
oh right,
is a prime example of that. I mean, they basically excommunicated him and called him a heretic. And Galileo, because there was a couple, if I remember correctly, Galileo was the one that said the solar system is not Earth centric, it's sun centric.
correct. And Neil deGrasse Tyson, in that video I mentioned earlier, also came up with this great Galileo quote, where he said, "The Bible tells you how to go to heaven, not how the heavens go."
And there's nothing wrong with that.
That
No,
was great.
yeah, no. And here's the thing.
But he got put to death for it. So, yeah, they had to back it up.
Like I said, if you were to pin me down and say, how old's the Earth? I was like, well, I don't know the exact amount of years, but I'd say millions. And humanity was evolved. That's how I believe. And it's like, did God do any of that? It's like, no. Because I don't believe that. So it's one of those things where my faith isn't really about creating. Isn't about the creation. God did what He did. I'm never going to truly understand the complexity of it because I'm a human. I'm not a god. And at that point, it's my whole point is as a Christian is to try to get to heaven and try to help as many people as I possibly can find their way there, with whatever works for them, but I'm also not going to, but I'm not going to tell you that this book that was written started 5,000 years ago was it is the definitive truth of science, because it's not
Yeah.
even close.
And too many people try to do things like bring the Bible in and take science out of schools, and that's unconscionably irresponsible toward our planet. Banning the use of the word, climate change, defending big energy because, well, the world's going to end on a certain day anyway because, God's bringing the apocalypse, and then being irresponsible and hurting other people by hurting our climate. Come on. That's not a good way to use faith at all.
No, it's not. And look, as it is said multiple times in Revelations, you don't know when the end's going to come. It's going to come like a thief in the night. There is whenever I counted one time, and I haven't caught up. I haven't caught up in the last few years, but I counted one time that I have lived through 34 different people saying that the world was coming to an end on a specific date, and I am 44. So, and you can go to Wikipedia and look up the different proclamations that's happened that is written down that they know of in the past several centuries to see how many times people were so sure. It's like so sure that the world was coming in. It's like that one guy who did it for like 3 times in the same year. Remember
Yeah.
a couple of years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh no, my calculations were wrong. Oh no, you just don't know. Is what I wanted to say. And a lot of it's to sell books or whatever the case may be, and things like that. I remember, 2000 was going to be the end of the world, according to some religious people. And then, of course, we had the Mayan calendar thing. And the only thing that happened with the Mayan calendar thing was, 4 years later, oh, they might have been right after all.
Well, that was awesome too, though, because of my anniversary. It was actually on the winter solstice, and it was like our 13th anniversary was in that 2012. The world was supposed to end, so I was like, "Woo! End of the world theme for the anniversary party. Let's do this." I made a great playlist,
Well,
including having 1999 in it by Prince, which was awesome because that was the year we got married. What all these great coincidences! I could have believed that Rapture was going to happen too. Had a party instead.
I've been to, and
Ooh,
it's the end of the world. Yes.
oh, we lost you for a second.
Oh, am I still here?
Yeah, you're back.
Uh,
Um, you said I've been to.
I've been to several of those end of the year parties, and especially with end of the world parties, especially those people who don't know that it's the end of the world, or don't believe it's the end of the world. It's a great time, but no, it's so I tend not to put much stock into people who suddenly come up and say, "Oh, I know when the end of the world is coming." And I remember History Channel would talk about when that was going on, had all of these Nostradamus prediction shows on for a while. The Nostradamus effect is what it was called. And it was a bunch of hooey is what I called it. But it was interesting to see all the hooey that they wanted to talk about. And I'm a Christian and I believe in revelations, but not like the Baptists do. And I'm Baptist. But the Baptists put way too much stock into revelations and into a verse or two of I think it's First John or something like that, talking about the rapture or whatever. It is not a fleshed out idea. It's one of those things, much like praying to the saints is or purgatory is not very biblically factual. Neither is the rapture or what we would consider the end times kind of stuff, because John of Patmos was writing about Nero. You know, it's a good book for us to remember that there is going to be a winner at the end of this, but because the Christians did win, the Christians did win the Roman Empire. It took them a while, but they did win over the Roman Empire, and they became the ruling for centuries became the ruling religion. So it's they did win. You and Christianity can win as a faith if it is treated properly and is treated with and treats the world with respect and not. The problem is Christianity and Christians are based in martyrism originally, and they still have this martyr complex, but they're also like privileged white kids, that don't
Right.
know their privilege. So that's another topic for another day. So I wanted to touch on so before we get into the politics, there's a couple other things I wanted to hit on, just because it's not just people of faith that poo-poo science. It's also there's secular people that do this as well. I thought, until I came up with this article, I thought it was only Americans that were stupid enough to believe in anti-vaxxing,
Yeah.
but obviously not, because there's this article where in Germany they're basically going to start um, proposing a fine for people who don't vaccinate their children in Germany. And I'm going, I thought we were the only stupid. Why is the rest of the world being stupid too? What are your thoughts on anti-vaxxing?
It, I, don't get me. You really want to get started? We don't have time for you to get started on this. It makes me very, very upset and angry. And I have some friends. Like I have to step carefully around one in particular, who even has lived traveling around with her children, um, in a trailer from like rainbow group to rainbow group and whatever, and doesn't vax. Like relies on herd immunity, and I just, holy shit, that makes me upset. I have autoimmune issues. I even go get the flu shot, even though the doctor's like, maybe you shouldn't. I'm like, it could cause a flare up, but we also had swine flu go through my house one time, and I don't want it to wreck my children. The measles outbreaks going on right now are infuriating. We eliminated that disease, and it can kill. Babies can't even get that vaccine for a few months, and that's who's the vulnerable group. You could kill someone's tiny infant because you were such a jerk about like not getting something unnecessary. It's not unnecessary. There are countries with vast populations and don't have the resources to get vaccinated. We don't know in our generation. We don't habitually know and have people in our families with polio who have been horribly crippled and died from that terrible, terrible disease because we eliminated it. You people not vaccinating means that it's going to end up here. There's going to be an outbreak of that next. And it terrifies me. I mean, if you go to India or you talk to folks from there, they still have, young people, like they know their aunt, their uncle, they know people who are crippled from that disease. So it's more like if they can get it, man, they're getting the vaccine because they understand. Getting removed is just this sense of privilege that has gone too far. It's disgusting to be selfish enough and believe all kinds of crazy pseudo, like not even pseudoscience. This shit with autism, that's a whole nother ball of wax. I have an autistic son. He didn't get it from vaccines. That's not how this works. That's just not true. It's been disproven. The guy who put that paper out has had his medical practicing license taken away. It's just not true. I get shit in email and Facebook all the time, all this nonsense about all these contents in the vaccines and blah blah blah. These are ingredients that aren't in there anymore or haven't been. Oh, and by the way, if you're of a certain age, look it up. Go get your measles booster. There were some bad vaccines back. If you were born in like the late 60s, early 70s, you might need a booster. I know I got my booster because there was a measles outbreak when I went to college and they started requiring it when you went to college. But I recommend everyone get it. Get any vaccines you can. I'm waiting for my health insurance to please cover shingles vaccine. They only cover it for over certain ages right now. And my sister is younger than me and got shingles. People who don't bother with chickenpox vaccine because, it didn't kill them. It can kill someone else. Someone who already has cancer and their immune system is suppressed, for instance, by chemotherapy, you could kill them just carrying around some dumb shit like chickenpox or measles. So anyway, it's irresponsible and mean to not use science.
Well, and it's also one of I was talking to. I went and saw my primary doctor last week for refills on the medicines I need to stay alive and stay semi healthy. And I was talking to her about this by chance, about because you had brought this up to me earlier about the measles thing, and they said they had to look into it, and I was like, okay, that's great. But that one of the things they talked about, she was like, I can't take that. I can't have vaccinations. I'm one of those rare people that can't have a vaccination. All my children have vaccinations because there's this thing called herd immunity, where if there is, a small percentage of our population can't do the vaccinations, they're, for whatever reason, they're allergic to it, or there's something in their body that doesn't allow that to happen. But if the rest of the population who can have it, then the likelihood of them developing one of these diseases goes down dramatically. But now that we're doing this anti-vaxxing thing, it's like they're having fucking measles parties at places, where basically they're making sure their kids get the measles so that they get immunity. That's what a vaccine's for. That is exactly what vaccines do, is so that your kids don't have to fucking suffer. And yet oh, Jesus Christ. Lord, how did we get to this point? And it's not like some, and people are like, well, religious people are anti-science. It's not the religious people who are anti-vaxxers mostly. Am I still on?
Yeah, you're on.
Oh, okay.
I and that's where we run into the problem, right? I mean, people like you and I aren't pitting science and religion against each other, but there are people that do, and there are people that do it in a way where they are pushing for these laws to protect their religion. And people are buying into that, and it's allowing people to have these exemptions like, oh, it's against my religion to get a vaccine, and anti-vaxxers who are just, stupid. Sorry, but come on now. Who just don't want to do it, are able to use these laws that are on the books in the guise of religious protection to not vaccinate their children. Like
Donald
putting
Trump,
religion in our politics, they need to be separate. They need to stay separate, and they're not.
Yeah.
There's been a terrible misinterpretation, I believe, of our Constitution, where it says there shall be no laws made in regards to religion, and the intent, was supposed to be keeping us from creating state religions and preventing that kind of persecution by government if you're not of a certain religion. Instead, people have twisted it to like, well, you're trying to make something against our religion by not letting us refuse medical treatment and by not letting us put "In God We Trust" on every public building. Like, you're persecuting us. That's an incredibly twisted way to read that bit of the Constitution, and it has allowed religious interests to spend a lot of money and be very, very loud and get, do damage to our legal system.
Well, didn't Trump a couple of this past weekend basically sign a executive order saying that you don't have to treat somebody if they somehow are against your religion?
Yeah.
It's yeah.
And that's a very specific case, and we already had our abortion show.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of our laws being put in certain states, and it's just an effort to try and get that to the Supreme Court. And that's just kind of adding momentum to that. It's preventing, it's allowing people to refuse to not only perform abortions, but birth control, lots of women's health services based on a religious ground. It's the Hobby Lobby case. It's that kind of thing. It can be ignored. It's not actually legislated yet, but having that opinion and that executive order to back it up when these cases get to the Supreme Court could help it do a lot of extra damage. And as I've mentioned before, for those of you who may not heard it, some of us aren't on birth control for birth control. My IUD keeps me from bleeding to death. Stop acting like you have some kind of moral issue. This talk the White House has been... Trump said last week in a speech that basically a baby could be born and then the doctor and parents are able to say whether it dies or not. That's patently untrue and horrifyingly disgusting, and people believe that. They did just pass some laws about giving an infant rights if there's a failed abortion, that they can't go ahead and complete it once the infant or the fetus is ex utero. This is specifically targeting late term abortions, and I understand that because the tech there, I unfortunately know in great detail, where, but people are just denying and not looking at the fact that late term abortions are very, very rare, and they are pretty much only used in the case where the mother's going to die if this infant is born, and whose decision that should be. But or the baby's going to die anyway. So putting these protections in place is being done with a lot of false flags and not looking at who it protects. And they're using religion to manipulate people's heartstrings.
So I've got a story about that. I was at a Christian camp on the beach. And this was in the 90s, so I'd show up in my flannels and Doc Martens because I was a grunger and we don't believe in the sun. And my jorts. I love jorts. Anyways, so we would have to do so many hours of being in lessons, for lack of a better term, basically preaching and stuff like that. And they had a preacher there. And he was talking about one of the most traumatic things that ever happened to him in his life and how he's still a Christian. And basically, him and his wife had been trying to have a child for some time, and she finally got pregnant. And as she was starting to give birth, the doctors came in and said, look, we're either going to lose the child or we're going to lose the mother. And she is unable to make that decision in this juncture. And he said, save my wife. We can always have another child. So here's my, and I bet if you were to ask him how he feels about abortion, he would have probably be very anti-abortion. But when it comes to something personal, do you see what I'm saying? When it comes to that kind of situation, then all of a sudden they're okay with it, Unfortunately, and this is where the sadness comes in, that he still lost both his wife and his unborn child. And those things happen. But those are the decisions, unfortunately, that are sometimes made, and you have to make those decisions, and they are devastating. I've never had to make a decision like that in my life, so I can only imagine what goes through someone's mind when they have to make that kind of decision, especially if the mother is making that decision. It's my life or my child's life. How horrible of a decision is that?
And if you have other children, right?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, and then to say, well, you can't even have that choice. Both of you can die. That's basically what it is, because in most of the cases that I've read about this kind of stuff, when it comes to that kind of decision, if they try to have the birth and save the mother, neither happen. Yeah. Or the baby is born, but doesn't live that long anyways.
Mm-hmm. So you wanted to talk about the movie we never actually talked about. It's almost time to wrap up, so I wanted to make sure we hit all our points here.
Well, we did talk about that movie, but the one thing I wanted to talk about, Let There Be Light, was for those who don't remember, you can watch it on YouTube. But one of the things that happened, and one of the subplots is that Kevin Sorbo's wife in the movie, but also his real life wife, develops cancer, and there's like this experimental treatment that has like a 5% chance of saving her life, and they say, let's go for it. They believed in the science. They didn't just suddenly, well, we'll just pray and let God take it. They also prayed, but they also, which is, prayer is good for a lot of things as far as that's concerned. It may not answer your prayers, but surprisingly, it helps comfort individuals. It's like a good attitude kind of situations. If you feeling the prayers and stuff like that, if you feel people are saying, yeah, I'm praying for you and I'm thinking about you, it actually helps that person in a mental way. And by helping that person in a mental way, it helps their healing process.
Oh, sure, it's got to boost, serotonin and things like that, like all good feels, like any meditation.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I wanted to hit on besides the anti-vaxxers is, how can people believe in flat Earth?
The
I
cats would have knocked everything off by now. That's just ridiculous.
It is. It is ridiculous. I mean, it's like, we're not on Discworld. I'm sorry. It's like, I have seen pictures from from people taking pictures on the Concorde. And the Concorde, for those who are too young to remember, it was a plane that, it was a passenger plane that basically could go Mach 1.5 or something like that. And was designed to where passengers didn't have to wear special suits or whatever. But to get to that you had to get to a certain altitude for that to be able to be effective. And to get to that altitude, you can see the curvature of the planet. And there is no way you cannot explain the curvature of the planet. I have seen way too many pictures of the Earth and its curve.
I've been on mountains high enough to see that.
See, that's what I'm saying. And it's like, how can you? It's like, oh, it's an optical illusion. No, you idiot.
Yeah, there's a lot of the lengths flat earthers go to explain things. The conspiracies of like Australia not actually existing, and like any number of, I mean,
So wait, where was the Lord? I know it's not in Australia, but it's right next door to Australia. So all of those wonderful movies of New Zealand porn, otherwise known as the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, doesn't exist. The beautiful Blu-ray collection sets that I have in my home are a
no,
figment
they're
of
all
my imagination.
actors, and that's all sets, and it's actually they're just flying in circles and landing you, somewhere nearby. I mean, the time change stuff. They're no. I just can't with flat earthers.
I just
The
don't
level
have
of
that.
stupid.
But politics,
Like the guy that with the rocket. Do you remember that? I think it was just last year. This guy built his own rocket, like to put himself on. It was like a very Wile E. Coyote type thing. Just try and get high enough to like see if I go, I'm not going to see that curvature and prove the Earth is flat. But no way he couldn't build a rocket. Not exactly a rocket scientist.
Wow. Look, I look. If you're getting your rocket equipment from a place called Acme, don't trust it. And more importantly, if you're getting your ideas from Wile E. Coyote, that's probably not a good starting point for science.
Yeah, it just looked ridiculous.
There, we're talking about science and stuff, but you also have to keep in mind. I know we're wrapping up, and I'm trying to, but we had so many points on this.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to understand is that politics is using religion to also do a war against our environment, because they are given so much money from petroleum companies because petroleum is bad for us. And honestly, there has been rumors and allegations that there are 50 mile per gallon and 60 mile per gallon cars that run on alternative fuels that are shelved, destroyed, put down by not only the car manufacturers, but the government as well, and the petroleum companies. Because if you were to get a $70 car, a car that went 70 miles per gallon, the oil futures would tank. Of course, they would also cause a lot of instability in the Middle East because that's where all their money comes from is oil.
Well,
So,
I'm not willing to go full on conspiracy with that. I think that is the talking point of people who just believe it's all a conspiracy holding it back. I believe that, especially in the Obama administration, we made domestic oil production a priority. We've seen a big shift in how things are handled in those very oil dependent countries and how dependent the rest of the world is on them. And people forget how many other products are, it's not just gas, as far as the price of oil and petroleum products like plastics and that kind of thing that are created from petroleum. I don't believe the whole economy is going to collapse and it's going to destroy all those companies. Those companies, given the right path through politics, can be, it can be moderated, right? We can switch to renewable fuels, I believe it's been proven. We saw oil prices go down significantly, gas prices go down, and the economy grew and grew during the Obama administration, for instance, and even since then.
yeah, but if you've noticed, the gas prices are starting to go up, and that
They're creeping
concerns
up,
me.
yeah.
And that concerns me because when gas prices start creeping up, that means our economy is about to take a hit. But that's
Still not near where they were.
No, they're not the $4.50 a gallon
And I
that we
think it's
were
worth
paying.
paying more and producing it domestically than continuing to undermine our national security, getting it from, the Middle East and supporting those regimes.
No, I agree totally with that situation. So there was one last thing I think. Oh, there was the video that I did watch, which was about the scientists and religious people
Oh,
agree.
with the whole panel from different
Yes.
religions. Yeah.
Um, I can't believe the rabbi pointed to the Buddhist priest and it's like sometimes I feel it's very zen. And I'm going really just like, but besides that, it was very interesting the conversations they had and everything. I remember when I was in college the first time there was a class that, and I don't know if they still do this in colleges or not, but when I was in college, they had this one class which was basically get to know the college experience, and also these are the friends that you should have for the rest of your college experience. I hung out with the lesbian and the double theater major, which I hung out with them, and I'm being the religious guy that I am, but I'm always skeptical. And it was one of the interesting things that they brought up in that conversation is always question your faith. There is nothing wrong with questioning. There's nothing wrong with questioning your faith. There's nothing wrong with new evidence coming to you. And that's one of the great things about scholarly studies, especially when we're finding, like when we found the lost gospel of Judas, or when we find the gospel of Mary Magdalene, or when we find the Dead Sea Scrolls, because those are treasure troves of information that we didn't have before. So that at that point educates us and helps us grow as people of faith, because we understand our faith better. We understand where we came from and where we went and how we got to where we are today. So I believe that it's okay. That's one of the things they brought up, and all of them sat down. The premise of the video, and we'll be posting it, is basically they'll have them all at the back of the room and yell out a question, and then they'll come forward if they believe the question. And one of them was, is it okay to question your beliefs? And it is. It's always okay. God didn't give us the ability, this is my humble Christian view, God didn't give us the ability to reason if he didn't want us to question.
From the #1 rated brand.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. So that is one of those situations where I honestly believe that we need to it's okay to question. It's okay to question science. One of the people I enjoy following and listening to is Tim Minchin, and he does this wonderful poem about this woman he met called Storm, which is she was a neo hippie kind of woman, is into crystals and all that kind of stuff, and all of that, and he was kind of poo-pooing on that, which he's a skeptic. And one of the things that he says in the poem is like, she says, you're just rigid, and you're, so and you're so rigid in your thinking. And he's like, no, if new evidence come up, I will change on a dime. And that's my thing, especially when it comes to science, but when it comes to religion or whatever,
Right.
if there is some new revelation, something that is proven to be a factual revelation, come to me. If God was to pop into my house today and it's like, say something to me, I'm like, well, there we go. I obviously was wrong, and I would come on to the show and it's like, and of course then September would be calling the men in the white coats to maybe have a discussion with me, but it'd be like, Jesus showed up and said this stuff, it's like, and I was wrong about something, but if I'm wrong about something, I will admit it when it comes to the scholar, because I look at Christianity as both a believer but also as a scholarly pursuit, because we're always trying to learn. A lot of my professors use the term theology is faith seeking understanding, and that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to understand my faith, and part of that is I have to question things. That's why I went to a Catholic college versus a Protestant, or especially a Baptist seminary, because I wanted to be able to question my faith. Also, I like the Catholics better as far as they have prettier robes
And statues.
and
Lots of pretty statues.
They have
Idol
lots of pretty
worshippers.
and they also have great hats, really wonderful hats.
I don't know. Hats are a little much.
I don't know. There was one I saw where it's like this giant, like half. It was like a kind of a cowboy hat, but it's what the Mighty Python guys wear in the Spanish Inquisition thing. That giant hat. I want one of those. And, it's like, it's great.
Goodness gracious.
So, anyways, now that I've mentioned Mighty Python and the Spanish Inquisition, maybe it's time that we go.
Maybe.
So thank you for joining us here at Heresy and Hearsay. I'm Reverend Barney, and you can follow me on Twitter at Seth Roth II. You can also find the show on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and any podcast catcher that you have. We also have a website. Just Google us. Don't forget our Patreon page, where for $2 a month you can help us keep going. As my partner, and as always, my partner in this, the Queen of Gink, the Empress of Podcasts, the hero of politics, Ember.
Yes, I'm September. You can follow me on Twitch and Twitter at 9 of 12. That's NINEOF12. And hear me on the Geek Grills and Trust Your Cape podcasts. Thanks for listening today, and bless your hearts. In the street.